Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at what when the day began, we thought would be one election that could shape the future of Europe, the one here in France that starts with the first round of the presidential election this coming Sunday. Turns out, though, that well, the British Prime Minister has weighed in with a snap general election call for June the 8th, and the one in the UK also mattering as far as what Europe will look like in the future. With us to talk about it, French Member of Parliament Jacques Millard from the Conservative Les Républicains party, journalist Alex Taylor, and we're also joined by political scientist Thomas Vitelliot of Open Cities with a Z at the end.
Exactly.
All right. Give us back France. So we're talking about Europe and what, how the EU, how the EU's brand name is being bandied about on the campaign trail. Well, give us back France was the rallying cry of the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. This was at a rally on Monday in Paris, where she took direct aim at her main rival, if you believe the polls for the second round, the centrist Emmanuel Macron.
No more French culture, but rather a globalized model, a sort of global subculture that aims to make all men the same, to make cultural differences a thing of the past, to consider human relations only in market terms. This is probably what pushed Mr. Macron, clearly in a hurry to end 1,500 years of French history, to claim that French culture does not exist.
Now, a little while earlier, at a rally across town in the French capital on Monday, centrist Emmanuel Macron made political hay out of being the one that embraces Europe.
Look at this election. Out of 11 candidates, 10 want to bring us back to a fantasy of the past. Back to closed borders. Don't whistle at them. Fight them. Go convince them.
Thomas Vitelliot, your thoughts on the way this French presidential election is playing out when it comes to the subject of Europe. Are you surprised at the way the debate on Europe has been couched?
Not really. I mean, we have a traditional position that have existed in the French debate on the EU since the 2005 European Constitution referendum. On the far right, you have Marine Le Pen that wants a Frexit, and she's been advocating the exit, departure of the euro since already a long time. On the far left, you have also some Eurosceptic, but not people who are fundamentally anti-European, but people who are critical of the current Europe, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and wants to change it. And then on the center left and center right, you have candidates who want to, defend, the current European treaties and do not actually at the moment suggest radical transformation of European institution settings.
Yeah, you mentioned that 2005 constitutional referendum. The French and the Dutch voted no at the time. It was a seminal moment for Europe. And it split political parties. It split your party, and it also split the Socialist Party.
I think that, in fact, Europe is too serious to be debated in such a campaign, because you take positions which are sometimes extremist, either for Macron or for Le Pen. I think that we have to face reality as it is. We need Europe. We are in Europe, as I said, and there is no way that there will be no European organization. But the point is that you have two ways to build up Europe. Either you go federal way, this is what Macron wants to do, it's a leeway to federalism all the way down, and I think it will fail. And then you have another approach, which is now gaining in Europe everywhere, which is to build up cooperation on a nation-state intergovernmental. And this is what comes. And what we need, in fact, is that we go away from ideology and we see and we face things as they are. As I said, we need Europe, but we don't need to build, let's say, a kind of kibbutz, because we are all sleeping in the same sleeping room. It doesn't work. We are different, and we need to have cooperation, and we need to have also flexibility. And I think this is what we'll achieve. But, you know, when a European organization as the European Union has been a dream for years and years, has been something which has been, you know, pushed every time by all political leaders in this country, except, as you said, the far extreme right or extreme left. And I think that today we are changing of world. And I do believe that, in fact, the reshape of Europe is going to come, but it will take years.
Alex Taylor?
I don't necessarily agree with both of you, because I think there has been quite a change over the last 2 or 3 years, and that I've been living in your country for the last 37 years. I've been trying to do programmes about Europe on French television for the last 30 years, and I was always very struck.
And succeeding.
Well, yes, no, I did lots of them, but every time I knocked on doors with projects about Europe, I would always get the same replies: L'Europe n'intéresse personne. Europe doesn't interest anybody. And all of a sudden, over the last 2 or 3 years, suddenly Europe has become as passionate a subject. If you look at Marine Le Pen or Mélenchon, they talk against Europe, but with passion. And I do actually think that's what we need, because it's inspired the others on the other side, the very few, but Macron, to speak. And it's the first time I've seen French politicians talk about Europe with any degree of passion. Before,
so it
always used to be at the end of political programmes, and people would say, oh, we mustn't forget Europe, and they put it on for the last 2 minutes, and it would be the boring minutes. But now all of a sudden, it's got very passionate, and I think that's a good thing, because without this passion, nobody cares about the 2 or 3 extra % on one side or the other. It's passion that's going to make people believe in the European project or not.
But if you go back to the 2005 referendum or to the 92 referendum on Maastricht, I mean, there was a very passionate debate going on in French society.
For a short while, but not as a general thing. It didn't go on like it is at the moment.
There is a new item that you have to reckon with. These are the crises of Europe today. There is not only one crisis, not only Brexit. You have a subsidiary system which is, you know, abolished. You have this question of migrants. You have the tension between France and Germany on nuclear power. You have the linguistic crisis in Brussels. So, you know,
you've always had that.
Pardon?
You've always had that. There's always
no. But for me, I want to speak my language in this organization, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to speak all the time globish. I tell you frankly, and because this is the richness of Europe to have different languages. And I speak German,
I've been trying to do that all my life.
I try to speak English, so I want also sometimes to speak French. But thirdly, I would say that you have so many crises, you know, coming up, and this is why, because, you know, Europe has been sold to the French nation or to the German nation as something that will be progress. And we see that, in fact, this is no more the case, because we are implemented in integralism. You know, it's a Keltian...
Okay, so wait, let's talk about specific issues. One that's near and dear to a lot of people. Tax harmonization. We've seen a big...
Forget about it.
Forget about it?
It will never come. Because this is absolutely, we are...
So you'll always have Luxembourg and Ireland who will be able to undercut corporate tax rates? And...
It's because of the euro, of course, that you should need what you've said, but it will never come. You know, Macron speaks of social harmonization, but this is a dream. This is a dream. There will
there
be
are lots of dreams. Europe has always... I can remember I'm old enough as you to remember very clearly when people started first talking about the la monnaie unique, the single currency in the 80s. People were on television...
Hold on for 1 second on Europe.
Hold on, just let me finish.
Yeah.
People were in television studios like yourself saying, this is a dream, it'll never happen. It did. It came about.
It happened, and it has become a nightmare. That's right?
Well, no, I don't think so.
It doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work for countries.
It doesn't work. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to
works? I think it works for quite a lot of countries. There are some countries who would have had problems anyway, like Greece, without the euro would have had problems.
No.
Greece wouldn't have had problems
nonsense what you say. Look at Germany has 230 billions of euro of surpluses.
Well, that would have been the case anyway.
Well, that will not be the case if you can adjust your money and competitiveness. Because this is true, and today those who say that euro has been a good idea said today we made a mistake.
No, that's a lot of things wrong with it.
The only point is how do we adjust it? The only way to save the euro
is going back to everybody's individual currencies.
Hold on for 1 second, Mr. Alex. The rich pay for the poor, and Germany say no. I'm not going to pay for the Greeks. I'm not going to pay for Italy. I'm not going to pay for France. And reread what Stiglitz said. The point is, how do we solve this problem? I'm pretty sure it's not there is no political solution. There is no political solution.
I tell you one thing. A political solution. I'm sorry. I mean,
there is the political solution cannot be reached. You need to have a political solution. You need to push for further fiscal harmonization, eventually social harmonization. But this is what is missing to the Eurozone. No, you dream. You absolutely
dream when it comes to the European Union.
That's it will become a nightmare. I tell you one thing.
I think Brexit. Can I just say something? I think Brexit will have a very positive effect on Europe in all the domains you've been talking about, because all of a sudden the fact that Britain, who was often the country which was slowing, dragging the reins on all the European projects, is now not going to be around the table. So I think in questions of defence, European army, I think in questions of patrolling the frontiers. Well, I mean, look at the world at the moment. We've got Trump, Erdogan, we've got China, we've got King Jong-un.
Defence will not be built up in European Union. Defence will be built on a separate way, on Europe à la carte, between a governmental agreement between Britain, France, and Germany, maybe Italy and Spain.
And you don't think that that's
But Jacques Niall, you know well that you talk about the bilateral defense ties between Britain and France. They're very closely knit, much more than many people realize.
Of course. This is why I say, but it has nothing to do with the European organization as such.
Well, no, but what's to stop Europe from coming together?
This is what I say. We will have a Europe à la carte, and you will never get social harmonization.
Like you would never get European money, they said before. Why on earth would you not get a European army?
Wait for a bit.
The context of the world as it is at the moment.
This Eurozone is not working. I'm sorry to say. It is not working. And this is the point. And the euro crisis is ahead of us and not behind.
What about peace? You say the Eurozone is not working, the European project. What about peace? I think the euro, the fact that we all have the same currency,
euro creates tension between the nation states.
I tell you, listen, as soon as Britain triggered Article 50, what happened 4 days later? Gibraltar, all of a sudden, this ridiculous argument about the British rock. All of a sudden, a former leader of the Conservative Party went on television 3 days after triggering Article 50, saying that we should send the fleet to defend Gibraltar. The fact that all these European countries come, and I would be the first to admit, I spent 30 years saying there's a lot wrong with the European project, there's a lot wrong with the euro. But I think now there is a kind of a passion and a realisation that this project does have some very sound
I want to answer to one point, and you make a big mistake. I tell you what.
It wouldn't be the first.
You say that, in fact, Europe has built peace. Sorry. This is why we had peace, that we have been able to build, cooperation between the states. This is reverse. And today, the point is, of course, yes.
So this is because of the German...
Listen.
I'm doing nothing else.
This is because the German realized, after this crash down on Germany in 1945, they realized that there was another attitude to make war to their neighbor, that we have been step by step building, a new organization.
You think it's a zero-sum game between France and Germany, where the Germans have the upper hand?
Well, the point is very clear. Today, we are facing, different views on European construction with the German. We have to face it. And this, because
we talk about it. We talk about it in Brussels.
Okay, so let me ask you, after the departure of the British from the European Union, again, we were saying at the outset, France will be the only EU member at the UN Security Council.
And then?
What will France's role be? What will France's weight be vis-à-vis Germany and vis-à-vis the rest of the EU? Just more broadly, how will France weigh more once Britain is gone inside of the EU than it did before?
The Security Council attitude of France is a security attitude in the Security Council of the UN of France by itself. Nobody in this country wants to have a European seat at the Security Council. That's all history. This is finished.
And more broadly, will France have more weight inside the EU once Britain is left?
The question to have more weight inside the EU is that France restore its internal credibility. That's another story.
I believe France will definitely have more weight because now it's often on issues that maybe France and Germany disagree, where Germany was agreeing with the UK. Now it must be through a collaboration through Germany and France. So automatically, France will have a bigger weight. But it's true that we need to restore also some form of credibility, and that's the goal, for instance, of Macron, who advocates that the goal to restore the weight of France in Europe is first to restore financial credibility. Not every candidate agrees with this view. On the far left, Mélenchon says, they cannot do without us. So we're going to negotiate.
In part one of our discussion, you heard Alex Taylor predict that once we get down to the nitty-gritty of the Brexit negotiations, people in the UK will then be having second thoughts about the direction that they took. In France, how much does the result of the election matter? Will, no matter what happens, everybody be brought to reason by economic imperatives, or could this really change the face of Europe, this upcoming election?
I think there are quite some check and balances to what actually candidate can do when it comes to the European Union. For instance, both Mélenchon wants to renegotiate the treaties, but he needs to have a parliamentary mandate to go to negotiation. And then once he has negotiated with his European partner, he has to come back, and he said he will do a referendum. Same thing for Marine Le Pen. She wants to leave the euro, leave the EU, but she said that she will do a referendum in France to see if her proposal is accepted. And currently, the majority of the population does not want to leave the euro, does not want to leave the European Union. Therefore, there is the campaign rhetorics, and then there is the reality of politics, which is, dealing with Parliament, with French Parliament, that also we don't know what's going to happen in the legislative elections of June. And that's actually, I think, the real key election of 2017 in France.
I think it's interesting for the British because we made the decision 10 months ago, so you can see what's happened since. When you compare, for example, the campaign promises, I'm quite interested because I'm seeing these kind of promises being made in France this week. When you compare, I won't even talk about the thing on the bus about £350 million a week, which supposed to come back from Brussels and go into the hospitals, and which they said 2 hours after the result of the referendum was declared wasn't going to be held. But when you think that one of the great promises, and I hear it in France, let's make Britain great again, let's make France great again. Well, when you look at what actually happens now, and Brexit is an advance compared to France. For example, our Foreign Minister Boris Johnson threatening sanctions against Putin. Well, nobody listened to him last weekend, and he wasn't even listened to at the G7. And it was him who was going around saying Britain will be great again. Not in the context of the current world, with the geopolitical situation we have with Trump, Putin, Erdogan. Each of our little individual countries, if we set up our borders again with their own little monies like it used to be when you and I were young, I don't think this is the best way. Well, no longer. I'm getting older and older as long as Brexit.
The question you put is interesting in a way, that you believe that we can have common position in Europe toward Russia.
Yeah, but
there is none. There is none. There is none.
That's not a common position.
There is none. Germany has a position which is not similar to France. And so what you say is that, in fact, the world is
similar enough that they both signed off on the Minsk agreement when it comes to
Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Well, the Minsk agreement, surely, but in fact, we see that, in fact, the Franco-German, acts on this issue is not really functioning very well.
I'm sure there's no opposition with Putin, but I think that's probably a good argument for democracy in the European Union, that we have a real debate. We don't have a single
I'm not going to defend Putin on every subject, but also what I want to say is that we pay, because of those sanctions, too much because of the American pressure.
All right, yeah, Putin is, of course, one of the fault lines in this election. But let me ask you to rebound off what Thomas Vitellios said, which is that, well, actually, the big election this time around, this is another one of the novelties, may not be the presidential election, could be the legislative election.
Well, of course, the legislative, we don't, first of all, who will be the president, wait and see until, fortnight. And then afterwards, of course, there will be a real challenge for the necessity to have, let's say, a coherent majority in the National Assembly. And I think it will be very difficult if it is Macron or if it is Le Pen or if it is Mélenchon. I think there will be a very big challenge to have this current majority to support the president. And in my view, if we have Macron, I'm pretty sure that in a year's time, we will have dismissals of the parliament because he cannot carry on his project.
All right.
I disagree with that. I believe if Macron is president and there would be some center-right coalition, I believe he could actually be maybe pragmatic and have a broad coalition there. However, I would like to say that I believe only if Fillon is president, we might have a stable system with a stable majority in the parliament. And the other three main candidates, Macron, Mélenchon, and Le Pen, will have to deal with a cohabitation situation.
Yes, that's
so shared of power.
France could be more like Italy?
Go back to the Fourth
Republic.
Republic.
Yes, surprisingly so.
Okay, we'll have to see. I want to thank Jacques Millard. I want to thank Thomas Vitelio, Alex Taylor. Stay with us, though, because it is time for Media Watch here on France 24. And we say hello to Diptyque Laurent.
Hi, François.
We heard Alex Taylor say that this morning while he was shaving, he was caught off guard. So having his breakfast, excuse me. There you go. Good point.
I think a lot of people in the UK are feeling that way this Tuesday, François, after that shock surprise announcement from Theresa May, one that's really thrown British politics and society into a spin. People reporting a lot on Twitter of what they call election fatigue, PM's message to the nation, really? General election, nation's message to the PM, please stop. We're all so tired after a Brexit vote, a general vote, and a Scottish referendum, all within the last 3 years. And there's even the first so-called victim of election fatigue. Her name is Brenda. She's from Bristol. And her video has been trending because it seems to resonate with a lot of politically exhausted Brits. Let's take a look.
General election.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics going on at the moment. Why does she need to do it?
So that was Brenda from Bristol. She's definitely tired of elections. And in fact, the BBC journalist who interviewed her posted this earlier on his Twitter feed, saying that at one point today, she was trending ahead of Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon.
Brenda from Bristol.
Brenda from Bristol. Okay. Remember her name. We've been seeing a lot of tongue-in-cheek responses to this very quick snap election. This person says, this election doesn't give Vladimir Putin very long to get organized. That's pretty unfair. No need to make comments on that further.
All right. There has been more analysis over whether or not, and Jacques Millard was wondering whether or not this could all backfire because in the past, people call snap elections. It doesn't always turn out the way you want it.
No, it doesn't. And there has been a lot of criticism, quite thick, coming in thick from the British press. The Guardian writer John Crace calls Theresa May dead-eyed, saying she puts the Tories' interests above anything else and says this is all being played out for May's own, quote, vanity and insecurity. She knows no one wants another election, but she just can't help herself. Now, on the flip side, you have this writer from The Times, which is more conservative newspaper, who says it makes perfect sense to capitalize on her soaring popularity and also the declining strength of her opponents. But ultimately, this election will not answer the big questions people want to know about the future of the UK post-Brexit. In any case, there's a lot of support for her on Twitter. This user says she's a political genius. What a boss move.
Like Ceausescu?
That's right. And you've got other reactions from the Huffington Post, who've been looking at, for instance, all the times that she denied she'd call an election. And it's a pretty long list. In fact, a lot of people have been compiling these lists. Even as late as last month, she said there'd be no election. Well, something happened over the Easter long weekend, I guess.
Has Theresa May surprised you as Prime Minister? Before she was the Home Secretary, she's been around a long time. She acted the way you thought she would.
She surprised me because she says she's a conviction politician, but she changes her mind all the time. I mean, she was for Remain. She was out there. If you Google, you could see Theresa May.
She paid lip service to it. She wasn't an active campaigner.
Yeah, she could have said, I'm I want to leave the European Union. She didn't. She actually went there. There's pictures with her campaigning for Remain. She said afterwards, there will be no general election until 2020. She just changed her mind because she went out hiking for Easter. She surprised me because there are all these comparisons with Mrs. Thatcher, who I'm not particularly fond of, but at least Mrs. Thatcher, you knew where you stood because she said something and that was the way it was. Theresa May changes her mind all the time. I'm rather surprised by the popularity she has.
The wind is changing.
Well, look at this. From The Guardian, they report that a poll suggests voters do back this U-turn. This was just a half an hour ago, so it's a pretty recent poll. So it is interesting as to why there is support for her. Let's just end with a few tweets, because Jeremy Corbyn has sort of been getting trolled online because he was sort of caught unaware of this decision by Theresa May. And somebody says this was his reaction, just deer in the headlights type of thing. There's also him calling in a favor to Putin. Putin seems to be making an appearance in every election at the moment. And finally, a new candidate, Larry the cat. Maybe not.
Larry?
Larry the cat.
Larry's the cat from
the
10
Downing Street, resident a feline.
The one who is...
What about Brenda?
Is not changing.
Somebody did actually tweet that.
All right. Many thanks, Diptyque Laurent. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here. More coverage of the run-up to that election. Of course, the one in France on our website, France24.com.